Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Ani Zonneveld. Peace, greetings, salam alaikum. So I'm Ani Zonneveld. I'm founder and president of Muslims for Progressive Values. And I don't think I need too much of an introduction, so I really want to get straight into you all meeting and getting to know Daisy Khan. I've known Daisy probably for about 17, 18 years at a minimum. And how that happened was she had this organization called, at that time, Cordoba initiative. And I was invited by Daisy and Imam, oh my gosh,
Faisal.
your husband's name. He's gonna kill me.
Okay.
Can you please, what's his name?
Imam Faisal, yeah.
Imam Faisal. Oh my gosh, he's gonna kill me when he sees this video. All right, so to perform a couple of songs at their event in New York, and so I flew in, and I was able to sing my song on my wake up, and just like Khadija, at a time when Muslim organizations were not welcoming, or actually probably still not welcoming, women, female singers singing Islamic songs. So that was in 2004, 2005, something like that. Anyway, so I've joined WISE, which is Daisy's Women's Islamic Initiative in Spirituality and Equality. Daisy Khan is an award-winning speaker, and she is a lot of fun to be around, I can tell you that. Which is WISE is the largest global network of Muslim women committed to peace building, gender equality, and human dignity. For 2 decades, Daisy has been combating anti-Muslim biases and is renowned as a thought leader on Muslim women's rights. On the 10th anniversary of 9/11, Daisy Khan was featured in Time magazine along with 40 prominent people defining what it means to meet adversity and then overcome it. As a prolific speaker, Khan lectures at businesses, schools, and think tanks, including the Council on Foreign Relations, Aspen Institute, and Bloomberg. She's a media commentator on CNN, MSNBC, ABC, PBS, and the BBC. So her book, which is really, really amazing, we've promoted on our newsletter. We will continue to promote it because I really feel that 30 Rights of Muslim Women is a book that everyone, regardless of what gender you are, whether you're Muslim or not, should have as a point of reference as part of your encyclopedia on women's rights in Islam. So without further ado, Daisy, do you want to say anything to my introduction?
Well, I just want to say that I'm really excited to be here with all of you because we're all like-minded people. Ani is part of my tribe. We've both been doing the same type of work, only from slightly different angles. And, the more of us that amplify this message that we have been carrying forth of human equality and human dignity and women's rights, the more we can affect the grassroots. So I'm excited to be here with each and every one of you because you are part of our tribe. And we need people, messengers, prophets, whether there's leaders or prophets or whoever we are, when we initiate things and ideas, those ideas have to be percolated into the communities. And that is why people who are part of organizations become very essential in carrying this message forward. So I'm very excited to be with all of you today.
Well, do you want to go ahead and share and get started, Daisy?
Yeah, so now I have to figure out if we can go back to sharing. Let's see. Okay, are we sharing?
Yes, we are
Right.
sharing. And
Are we sharing full screen or are we sharing
um,
slide? Okay, are we sharing the slide now? Right?
yes, now I see
Okay.
the full screen
So
slide.
this slide is going to be here for a little while. Basically, I'd like to just take you a little bit through how I came to this work. Because, like Ani, who was a musician, I kind of also have this sort of very unusual trajectory of coming to this work. So a little bit, if you could just bear with me a little bit about my own history. I know Ani mentioned a few things before, but I'd like to just go through a little bit. I was born in Kashmir in northern India. When everyone was expecting a boy. I was not supposed to be born a girl. I was supposed to be a boy. And I was premature and was not expected to live. So I was left to, fend for myself. Hold on one second, please. Ani is just mentioning something about approving because I'm a co-host and I have to approve you, Ani. So sorry about that. When my grandfather, who was an engineer and also a self-taught Islamic scholar, he came home and he heard the whole house was in mourning, and he said, "What is going on here?" And they said, "Well, Halima gave birth to yet another daughter." And he was so angry because he knew that there was no place for this in Islam, that he climbed the stairs and picked me up and proclaimed to everyone that she is a gift of God and she will be treated like everyone else in this household. So I was given all the privileges. I enjoyed the rights afforded to a boy. I played sports, learned music, painted murals, and I was even sent to America to pursue an education in the arts, because the only two noble professions for girls in Kashmir at that time was medicine and teaching, and I didn't want to be either. So, but my grandfather had given me a brocade-clad Quran, and in it, he had inscribed the words of the Quran that says, "Oh Lord, increase me in knowledge," because he knew I was going to America abroad, because he had also been to America, and he wanted me to pursue all the knowledge I could pursue. I never had any idea that I would get involved in this work. I was coming here to study arts and then to have a career. But then my childhood memory, I have this childhood memory of my father dangling a pair of boxing gloves and in front of me. And years later, I asked my dad if he had ever given me a pair of boxing gloves. And he said, yes. And I said, why? He said, because you were the third of three daughters. And I wanted you to teach you how to defend yourself. So, these boxing gloves are seared in my brain. And they have become a metaphor so much more than what my dad had given them to me for. So years later, in America, I focused my energies on education. I began a successful professional career as an interior architect. I worked in Fortune 500 companies in New York City. This was my life. I was a career woman. And then, by some divine intervention, I got married and I became a statistic. I became an imam's wife who had her own career. I helped with marital counseling, funerals, birthrights, ending divorces, because, we had a community and the community needed help. And in America, every pastor has a wife, and the preacher's wife is always doing a lot of work. So I wound up getting involved in his work, even though I had a career. And at that time, I never really thought the line between what a woman could do in private and what could she do in public was very unclear. In other words, it was uncharted territory. So, and I kind of began to pave the way for me to step into certain roles that would have been difficult. So I recall, like Ani said, somebody asked me to do the call to prayer for a morning breakfast, like for an interfaith breakfast. And I thought that was such a strange thing. I said, I've never done a call to prayer for, I used to do it for my own community, but never done it publicly in front of everybody. So I went to my father-in-law, who was an, great alim from Azhar. And I said, I need to recite the call to prayer. And he says, la, 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 no, you cannot. And I said, why? He said, because a woman's voice is aura. Aura means her private part. And I thought that was such a strange thing, because he was so progressive. He was so forward looking. He was so inclusive. But yet, when he said that to me, I was a little shocked. And I was like, wait, this doesn't make sense. So then I said, wait, if women recite the Quran publicly. And if a woman can recite the Quran publicly, why can't she recite the call to prayer publicly? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, you're very naughty. You're right. Go ahead. So with that, I did my first call to prayer. And today I can tell you with absolute certainty, there are scores of women, chaplains everywhere, doing the call to prayer publicly And so it's become very norm. So what I'm saying is that there are ways that, doors have to be broken through, and you have to pay your way. And then 9/11 happened. None of us expected this to happen, and a lot of our lives changed. And there was this little old lady who asked me in a church about Muslim women's rights, because we had just started engaging with Afghanistan. We were seeing terrible images coming from Afghanistan about the brutality against women. And I couldn't answer any of those questions because I hadn't done any work when it came to women, women's rights. I was dealing with my own community and doing community work, but I had not really understood what was going on in the world. And these images were also traumatizing me personally. So then she looked at me and she saw that, I told her, I said, oh, women have received rights in 7th century Arabia, and, all the rights that all of you know, the common things, the divorce, the inheritance, and property rights, and education. And I just rattled them off. And then she looked at me and she said, but what about Afghanistan, my dear? Tell me what you're doing about it. And, there are these moments in life when God speaks to you through another person. Like the message has to be sent to you in a way that you would have never imagined. And this little old lady, 80 years old with gray hair, was the messenger, that you have to do something, you have to step up. And it was a calling, and I felt a mandate was being thrust upon me. And I felt this burden, and I looked and I said, corporate America does not need me, but my community needs me, because I knew I had certain skills. So even though I was an architectural designer, I had no idea how I was going to do this work. I just accepted this mandate, quit my career, and dedicated myself full time to community service. But I do remember asking my husband, because I was earning a very good salary and I had been sent to America, stand on my own feet, my mother said, make sure that you're financially independent. What was I going to do now without the money? So I asked him, I said, can you support me? He said, you're doing God's work, God will provide. That was it. I just left my corporate paycheck with that conviction that somehow God will take care. And he has. And during this time, I began to witness a lot of misuse of Islam for personal gain, including the oppression of women. As I started engaging women from around the globe, I realized that our best chance to combat these injustices in the name of our faith is to construct religiously grounded arguments to lift the truth of Islam, a truth that had inspired positive social change for more than 1,400 years. And that's, when I established WISE, an organization that I founded, that Ani mentioned. Ani, I think you're in here somewhere. You can
Yes.
find yourself. You can try and find yourself. But, we brought all these amazing women from all over the globe together to strategize, to talk to one another, to see what's possible. And of course, it was amazing. And this is when I realized why my father had given me these boxing gloves, was that we had to all come together into the arena to fight the big fight. I couldn't do it all by myself. We had to do it together. And so as a Muslim woman, I just could not witness the subjugation of women and accept it in silence. As many of you are activists, you're doing that in your own life. And so I decided that I had to do this for 5 reasons. And reason number 1, the faith of Islam has never restricted women from interpreting nor expressing their faith. In the West, Muslim women's suffering is often attributed to Islam itself. In fact, even in some secular countries, you always see Islam bashing going on, and somehow the treatment of women are being attributed to Islam itself. In Muslim majority nations, women are essential in preserving tradition, keeping Islam alive. And we see that playing out in many countries right now. Then women's struggle for emancipation is often linked to their fight for justice. And Muslim women increasingly want to define themselves through their religion, and not through just human rights or secular means. So a year after WISE conference, I got this frantic call, and this is the power of networks. I got this frantic call from the historian of Mecca, and she had come to the conference. And she said to me, oh my God, you're not going to believe what's about to happen here in the Haram in Mecca. They're about to remove women from the prayer space. in the haram itself. And, for 1400 years, women and men have prayed in the same space. And there's this effort going on to remove women to make space for men. So we would have been relegated to some corner in the back, maybe up in the balcony, on the side, somewhere else. And she said, I'm a historian. This is terrible. This has never happened. This is the prophetic tradition. What are we going to do? And I had no idea what to do. So I sent an email to all my women that I had already assembled. And one of them said, oh my God, I'm a queen of petitions. And so she stayed overnight to do a petition and created this petition called the Grand Mosque Equal Access for Women Project. It was a big, audacious title. And within a week, we were able to collect 2,000 signatures, even though we just started with the 200 women that I knew and my community. Everybody circulated 10 other women that they knew from around the globe. And there were things like, there will be a mutiny, follow the prophet's example, this is a holy site. So there were actually comments in the petition that had also been added. And then I delivered these signatures to my historian friend, and she took it to the king because the king had told her, okay, if you come with something, show us. And so she had the opportunity to do that. And so she said, petition delivered to the king. He's pleased to receive signatures from women all over the world. And almost immediately the issue of moving women from Masjid al-Haram was dropped. And this is me just last year. When I went to Umrah and I saw women and men together in this space, and I thought to myself, I felt like my foremothers, Hagar, Khadija, Fatima, Aisha, Sumayya, Salama, all these women who lived in this and were around the Kaaba, along with the Prophet, were applauding us for remaining steadfast in our courage. And this, my friends, is the power of networks and of numbers. So you don't get taken seriously if you're the lone voice. You do get taken seriously when you have numbers, and numbers do matter. So we established a Global Muslim Women Shura Council shortly after that, and we issued position paper after position paper because issues were coming from all over the globe. Women were saying, oh, we have this issue going on, we have that issue going on. Domestic violence was so prevalent in Muslim community, and it was being justified under Islam, that the Quran says you have to beat your wife. Violent extremism had taken over, and we had extremist groups defining the agenda for the whole global Muslim community. Adoption was considered forbidden, even though we had so many children languishing in institutions when the Prophet himself was an adopter, and he himself was an orphan. So the care of orphans seems to be like, no one seems to care for them. And female genital mutilation was another issue that was brought. Now, just on the female genital mutilation, this position paper that we did, we circulated this to our network. One of the women said to me, you know what, I think this might work with the imams in Gambia. And so she took this, a pamphletized version of this. She walked into a colloquium of imams and she said, I just want to show you something for 5 minutes. And she showed them the key points against how female genital mutilation is an un-Islamic practice. And all the shuyukhs and the imams just sat and read the points. And they said, oh, we are going to issue a fatwa against this practice because this is so convincing. And they issued a fatwa. It's in my book. I explain how this happened. And then with that fatwa, she was able to go from one imam to another imam to another imam. For some 2011 to 2018, she was just going from imam to imam, group to group, and medical practitioners. And in 2018, Gambia banned the practice. And when I went there for that event, the vice president of Gambia, was a devout Muslim woman, said to me, thank you very much, because this was the missing piece of the puzzle that we needed, because we had to convince the imams. Now, you recently heard that there was an effort by some imam to turn this over, right? And guess what happened? There was so much opposition at the ground level because all these people had been trained already. And the medical practitioners, who are young male nurses, all fought against it, and everybody who had been where awareness had been raised. So what I'm sharing with you is the work that you do. You know how important it is to change the hearts and the minds of people at the ground level. And so this is how it happened. But then there was something that really struck at home. One day I had an intern who came into my office, and she said that she shared a harrowing experience with me. And she said, since 12 years old, my immigrant parents have taken me annually to my native country to introduce me to potential suitors. And to avoid this, she actually ran away from home. And I was surprised because this was in my own backyard. This was not in some country overseas. This was right here, literally not even 5 minutes, 5 miles away from where I live. And I was so upset. And then she was very smart, and smart in the sense she was extremely intelligent. She applied for scholarship. She got a Truman Scholarship. And so she was able to support herself during that scholarship. And then I asked her, what can I do? She said, I actually came to intern for you to see what you might be able to do. I said, what do you want me to do? She said, I was looking for information. I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't find anything online which could help me. So can you put something together? You're doing this work already. Can you put something that is searchable online that young girls like me can access? And so with that, with all these position papers that I had already published, and people were telling me these position papers are, separate, and then there were all these other things that were going on in the world, I thought to myself, okay, why not create a manual? So the manual is now 30 Rights of Muslim Women book. It took 4 years to write this book, and it was not easy. The path was not simple, and my research did take years because I had to do it right. I'm not a scholar. I'm not an academic. I am an activist. I'm a lay jurist who has learned everything on the job. I was an architectural designer. So this is the most unlikely project, for me to produce. But I had learned a lot about how to convince the Muslim jury, which is basically the Muslim population around the world. And despite not being a native Arab speaker, I found myself venturing into unknown territories. I mean, really, when you actually look at the wealth of knowledge that is out there, it's very stimulating. I explored the world of jurisprudence, commentaries, exegesis, and narratives I had never heard of before in my life. And I did not embark on this journey all by myself. My traveling companions were the writings of extraordinary women scholars. And that's what was frustrating for me, to see the level of scholarship that already existed that had never seen the light of day. Like these women, their scholarship, why isn't it prevalent? Why aren't people reading these books? So you will, a lot of people, if you are a book reader and you read a lot of books on women's rights and feminism, you will see all those women's voices in my book, because they are the ones who I used as, people whose arguments I had to use in the book. So, and it's really remarkable. So their writings were like, stars in the night sky, which led me to have a deeper understanding of my own faith. So for me, this book actually wound up becoming a spiritual development project. And so I'd like you to read it that way. I'd like you to read it from that lens too, because it'll open up many, many doors for you, and open up your mind. You'll be very excited. So it's not just a hard issue book. There's a lot of inspiring stories in there. The book has two purposes. One, because the battle fought by Muslims like us is twofold, because we have Islamophobes who insist that Islam oppresses women, an idea that got fueled mostly by mainstream Western media. And on the other hand, we do have zealots, and we do have fanatics, and we do have, people who have outdated attitudes towards women. And so we have this cultural misogyny that is being mistaken for religious practice. And I'm seeing this play out in Afghanistan right now. So the book specifically debunks all these things, debunks everything that we have heard of against women. It's debunked, because oftentimes it's a false hadith. Oftentimes it's something that was canonized years ago for empires for some reason, and it's completely flawed. It has no basis in the Quran. The book does start with how the first couple, it mentions Eve and Adam. It shows how without Eve there would be no progeny, no family, no community, no society. Meaning that a woman has a very essential role in creation. So a woman should not be taken lightly. She's not just just a womb. She gives life and brings life into this world. Adam would not be able to do anything without Eve. It also shows how the Quran celebrates the feminine voice, how it invites the feminine voice back to the conversation. I'm sure you've heard of the verse called Mujadala 58:1, where the woman was complaining to the prophet about her husband trying to divorce her. And then God says in the Quran, God has heard the word of that who is arguing with you concerning her husband, raising her complaint to God, and God hears your dialogue, it says. For God is ever listening and constantly the seer. So there are many verses that got revealed because women asked a question, or a woman wanted an answer from the prophet, and then the verse gets revealed as a result of that. So you will also see that in the book. And for instance, Salama, the prophet's wife, asked that very daring question to the prophet: why is the Quran only addressing men and mentioning only men when women were so many of the followers of the prophet? And again, the most beautiful verse 33-35, which all of us cite when it comes to women's equality, was revealed. And and it's one of the most, it introduces for the first time, perhaps in all of human history and in any religion, there is not a single religion where you will see this kind of thing in the scripture. It is the most gender inclusive language, and it is in the form of a revelation. And you all know about this verse: the believing women, the true men and women, the patient men and women, the humble men and women. It talks about men and women, constantly shows that men and women are equal in the eyes of God. So this is such an essential thing. I also noticed a very distinct pattern in the Quran. God does not always choose the best and the most experienced individuals to serve his mission. God favors the unexpected, the insecure. It's always the orphan, somebody with a speech impediment, and the defective, even an underdog. And in the case of women, single women, widowed women, separated women, childless women have all been given incredible responsibility or a mission to carry. So this for me was a message for me personally, that, and for each of us, that regardless of our circumstances, each and every one of us can accept a mandate for ourselves, and particularly if we have the will, and if we know for sure that we have a mandate, that this is my mission in life, I got to do this. So nothing is preventing us from taking on this huge charge that God has sent us, because we are all God's steward on earth. The book also shows from the very beginning how the crucial role that women played in societies, families, and faith. So, oftentimes conservative people will tell you the woman's role is just in the home, relegated to the home. No, not at all. You will notice in the book, women are everywhere. They're in politics, they're in family, they're in society, they're in business. These women protected, they sheltered, they influenced, they taught, and they disseminated the prophetic message. So they were involved, heavily involved, and they also endured hardships. They resisted the mighty, and there are many stories. Hagar is an example, how she stayed behind in the desolate valley, and as a result of her, we founded Mecca. Mecca is now founded by Hagar. She is the founder of Hagar. In today's nomenclature, you would say, oh, I founded this organization. Well, or I founded this town, or this woman founded. Well, she stayed behind. She was all by herself. She was looking for water. Water gushed out, and then the well came into being, and people started coming. And the town flourished under her because her son was still a little boy. And so she was in charge of everything. And then, today we see Mecca, we never attribute it to her. What we do we go to the Hajj and we do the sa'i back and forth and we reenact her struggle. But do we, 4,000 years ago, a woman founded this little town, which has now become, our top holy site. Then there's Asua, the Pharaoh's wife, who was the first adopter, according to the Quran. She adopted a child who was a Jewish kid, and she knew that the Pharaoh would slaughter him, but she adopted him. She hid his identity, and then he became a prince, and he saved his people. There's Maryam, who's the mother of Jesus, who gives birth to Jesus out of wedlock. And then she has to deal with the taunts of everybody while she's walking pregnant, and they're all like taunting her for what she had done. So these are modern day examples, right? Today, we see these things, but we never think of them as these things having, the historical relevance. And, but then only to see her only child, a word of God, a great prophet, cast into her womb in such a special way, raised and nailed to the cross. I mean, today we see so many children die, and then here is a woman who's watching her son on the cross. And, but imagine what that must be for a mother, right? And of course, then there's Khadija, who's, of course, such an important role. She not only supported the prophet during the marriage, she was incredible. She was a wealthy woman, and she became the first Muslim, and she allowed the prophet to spread the word of God because she provided financial support while her tribe was being sanctioned. Today, we always hear the term sanctioned, right? Did you know that at the time of the prophet's tribe, Khadija's tribe, was sanctioned? They were pushed out into a corner because they were trying to punish them. They didn't want to trade with them. So, but she is another luminary. And so in a nutshell, the 30 Rights of Muslim Women does dive very deeply into the Quranic and historical support for Muslim women's rights. And they're all classified according to the 6 objectives of Sharia, the right to life, intellect, religion, dignity, family, and wealth. And it does clarify how Islamic faith empowers women to express their faith. And the comments I get from people are, they really love reading the poignant anecdotes of women who uplifted their communities and shaped our destiny. I mean, there are destiny shapers in this book. We didn't even know the role that they played, the important role that they played, but they're in it because they've been written in history books, but they've never been lifted up. And, the first martyr, for instance, was a Muslim woman. And the book also covers everything from spirituality to rights to maturely choose marriage. And I will take you through each and every one of them. So here are some comments from some scholars. An encyclopedia reference. Niamat Barzanji loved the book. She actually thought, she's a scholar I deeply admire and respect. And she found the book very exciting because she likes to see how academic work can become actionable. And she really liked the fact that it was intellectual research, spiritually guided, and providing new perspectives of the Quran while debunking misinterpreted traditions attributed to the Prophet. And she liked the fact that I explored women's realities because there are a lot of modern day women that are actually included in the book who are embarking on their own journey to restore their own rights and transform their lives. So then we got some nice reviews from both Kirkus and Publishers Weekly. Those of you who are into books, you know how important these two are. A compelling case for recognizing women's freedom and fulfillment as centerpiece of Islamic values. Then this solid theological guide is worth the look, which is Publishers Weekly. So both of them really liked it. And, it's always, as an author, you always wait to see what these big reviewers say. And Kirkus is usually a very snarky, reviewer, but I was very pleased that they found that the book was this is just a brief, it's a much longer review. So what is in the book? Under the right to protection and promotion of mind, you will see civic and political leadership. And here you will see the Queen of Sheba, who's hailed as an archetype of a global political leader. because of her transparency, reliance on public consultation, and she placed the welfare of her people over war. And today, as we're seeing all these nations warring with one another, it really would be great to bring Queen of Sheba back into this, because she refused to go to war, because she knew, she quote unquote, she said, when kings come into town, they destroy everything. And so you could see the destruction that's happening at the hands of these war machines. And so I think that this is, and she's compared to the Pharaoh, who is, an archetype of tyranny, and showing that a powerful woman can be a righteous leader. So, but also, so this is just an example of all the women heads of state. So I actually mention all of these women in the book. So activists who have to go out there and speak on this topic, you can take this one article and you can make all the arguments that you need to make, because it's really well researched. And I go, and go into a deep dive. But you'll also see in every article, there will be a Quranic reference that supports that, right? There will be a prophetic tradition, something that the prophet did, said. There will also be the hadith, if there's a hadith that supports that. And there'll also be the false hadith that is used against that, right? So, and then I will explain that false hadith in detail, because that's what I found in all these scholarly books. There were great things in these scholarly books. Then the next one is to career pursuit, then freedom of speech and expression. Right now, you know that women aren't being allowed to speak in Afghanistan. And the freedom of speech and expression is actually an excellent article. It's worth reading, because it's like, it's so shocking that there's so much freedom given to Muslims, and yet we think that, we don't have the right to speak. There's a right to protection of testimony and witness. And this here, you will see whether a woman is half that of a man. Absolutely not. It's very well explained of how that is not true. Right to your religion, to religious and spiritual leadership, to be a jurist and interpreters of text. So in spiritual leadership, when I assumed the position of authority, I was asked by, and I explained all the ways that women lead spiritually. So you don't have to be an imam. You can be a khatib, you can be a da'i, you can be ustada, you can be a marriage officiant, you can bless babies, you can teach people. There's so many ways to be a spiritual leader, and you can be a sheikha. So I've listed all of these ways that people have exhibited spiritual leadership. It's not, spiritual leadership should not be confined to just being an imam, because oftentimes people just focus on that. And I'm not an imam, but I do a lot of spiritual work for my community. And I don't have a title, I don't have any of that, but I do it because, it needs to be done. So in the case of the first time, I was mentoring a couple who were supposed to get married. My husband was supposed to officiate that marriage. They asked me if I could do that marriage, and I said, "No, I don't. Women don't do marriages." They said, "Yeah, but we're really comfortable with you, and we really want you to do it." So I went to my husband. I said, "Can a woman officiate a marriage?" And he said, "There's no prohibition." I said, "Well, why hasn't it been done?" He said, "Because, it's all based on the need of the community. If you need to do it, you step in. There's nothing preventing a woman." So then with like some trepidation, I went and I got myself ready. And a week before the wedding, the uncle said, one of the uncles said, "Oh, if a woman is conducting this marriage, it's forbidden. I'm not coming to the wedding." And he was very important. And so there was an impasse. There was crisis 1 week before the wedding. There's a crisis. Where are you going to find? Who are you going to find? What are you going to do? And then we had to call Al-Azhar in Egypt to find out, because they were from Egypt. The uncle was from Egypt. And when we called them, they said, "Oh, we've been conducting marriages for 10 years. Women have been conducting marriages for 10 years. No problem, no problem." That was it. That sealed it. And then when he came to the wedding, and he was watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I didn't make a single mistake. Everything was perfect. And then at the very end, you know what he said to me? He said, "A woman should have never proposed marriage, because that is not right. A man has to propose the marriage. And I said, Khadija proposed marriage to Prophet. And he goes, no, she didn't. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to win against this guy, you know? But the point is, people don't know. So all of these things are in this article. So you will see that kind of stuff. Okay, now. Right to your religion, to spiritual knowledge, access spaces. There's this article. I love doing this article because it talks about the first mosque, the Prophet's mosque, how it was, what it looked like. It was like this. It was like a, you know, like a community center. Yes, women were in the same space, men were in the same space. There was no separate entrance. There was no barrier. And it was just like any community center, and you will see how big the mosque was, how the Prophet actually built it with his own hands. It was unbelievable. So I kind of unearthed all these stories of, and it will paint a picture for what early life looked like, you know, for Muslims. Then there's right to your this thing. So this article is the longest. This is about marriage. It is about forced marriage. It is about maturely choosing marriage, which is child marriage, and then accepting polygamy. So I remember when I was in the mosque, a woman from the mosque called me and she was traumatized. And she said, my husband is taking a second wife. This is in New York. And I said, oh, really? How is that happening? Because, you know, we have laws against it. And she said, well, he just found somebody online and he wants to marry her. I said, well, who's conducting the wedding? Somebody has to officiate the wedding. She said, well, he's doing it himself. And I said, okay, so who is witnessing the marriage? And she said, oh, he told me that he has angels witnessing the wedding. So I told her, I said, okay, fine. If he wants to come back to the mosque, tell him to bring the 2 angels to the mosque tomorrow so we can get the angels to sign the paperwork, and then he will be officially married. But these are the kinds of things that I have seen in the community where people will take full advantage of something. And so anyway, this was that story is also included in here because I wanted to show how the kinds of things that happen in our community. Then we have divorce, and again, I had this very strange a story. A woman called me from Florida saying her brother-in-law had pronounced talak, talak, talak to her sister, and was she divorced? Because, you know, if you utter talaq 3 times, you're technically divorced, according to many Muslims. And I told her, I said, you're living in America. A divorce has to be given to you by a judge, not by like verbal talaq. It doesn't work that way here. We have to respect the law of the land that we live in. And so she said, well, okay. And then I asked her, I said, you know, was he temporarily insane? Did he go mad for that moment? You know, people say a lot of things when they go crazy. And she said, yes, he was insane. I said, so he was temporarily insane. So if you are temporarily insane, according to even Islamic law, then you're doing it in the fit of anger. And so it doesn't qualify. And then she looked at me, she said, I really trust you. Thank you so much. But they won't accept it from a woman. Can you deliver this? Can you get a man to say this? So there was an intern in my office. His name was James. I asked him to come over, and he knew a little bit of Arabic because he was studying gender studies. I told him, I said, deliver the news to them. And that's how it was. So we averted this divorce. So I actually mentioned that story in the book also. But this is in family planning and reproductive rights. I talk about Roe versus Wade and the Islamic position on abortion, on the care of orphans, on motherhood and womanhood. I give an example of, you know, what constitutes motherhood. I even talk about monetizing motherhood, you know, how much a mother would make if she was paid for her motherly duties, you know. And but I also give an example of a woman who, you know, Rabia al-Basri, She rejected many marriage proposals. She said, God can give me all you offer and even double it. It does not please me to be distracted from him, even for a single moment. So farewell. She would always say farewell to all her, but her life did not fit the pattern for women of her time. Instead, she retained full control and legal autonomy of herself. She was neither wife nor a mother, nor under any male authority. And today, she is like the mother of Sufism. And, we hail her as like the ultimate spiritual leader. So, these are all the other things: inheritance, financial independence. In inheritance, I talk about the inheritance laws and property ownership, freedom to movement, to modesty. Modesty article is very extensive. It's probably the lengthiest one there is. Freedom to movement is very important because Afghan women are told they can't go outside their home right now. Freedom from domestic violence, to safeguard against FGM, protection from rape, sexual assault, and adultery. While I was writing this article, a woman from Indonesia contacted me and said, you need to add marital rape in here. And I said, oh, what's that? I didn't realize there was such a thing. And she said, oh, wow. And all of a sudden I find this wealth of information on marital rape. And that was such a sensitive topic, because I didn't want to like come across as, okay, I'm entering into somebody's bedroom and telling people what to do. But then when I read all the articles and what scholars had said about it, it was so freeing for me because now I was able to really speak about it in a very intelligent, sober way. So then, of course, there's child trafficking because this happens a lot. People marry their children off. They sell their children when in times of war. Health and hygiene is so important because mothers have specific needs, and if they're not given adequate medical care, this is important, because it leads to child mortality. And so then there's being a trustee of God. This is one of my favorite article because it really goes into the depth of all human beings have a specific charge by God, and how you can take on that charge and what is your responsibility, not only to Earth, not only to Mother Earth, but towards other human beings, and why men and women are called to do good and to prohibit the bad. Then I added the freedom from gossip, slander, and defamation because people don't realize what a crime it is in Islam to slander somebody and to gossip somebody, or to gossip against somebody, because people value two things in life: their own life and their character. So if you defame somebody's character, it's as if you have taken their life. It's equal to that. So in Islam, you cannot slander somebody, but women are often slandered. Do we not hear of women being slandered? Oh, she's a loose woman, she's a this, she's a that. So this is very prohibited. According to the Quran, it's very strong language in the Quran, and you'll see it. And then finally, I don't know why we still have honor killings in places like Turkey and in places like, in Jordan. Like, it's so geographic. It's very specific to certain areas. You don't see it in other areas at all. This notion of honor, that you have to be killed for honor. So again, explaining it in a very sober way. No, you cannot honor kill because killing is murder. And it's like one of the second major crimes in Islam. Disbelief in God is one, and second to that is taking another human life. So this is a very strong article, in my opinion. So today we have this, basically to kind of like conclude this, this book has become my boxing gloves, because it's a shield against oppression and it's a hammer against injustice. And today we see education held hostage. The tension between spiritual and secular is being played out in Afghanistan, where girls in high school have been barred from continuing their education. And but yet you have all these examples of what the Prophet said about education, what the Quran says, about education. So I'm not going to go into each and every one of these slides, but whoever wishes to have the benefit of this world, let him acquire knowledge. And even the Quran emphasizes it, as God has taught him, so let him write. I mean, what is all this about if it's not about seeking knowledge and, getting this thing? Women obtain distinguished positions in all fields of jurisprudence, science of interpretation, medical science, calligraphy. I mean, there's like, this book is full of medieval books, stories, vignettes from every corner of the world. Wherever you live, there's going to be a woman from your region that is mentioned in the book. So I wanted to make sure that we were covering Islam universally. So it's not just one specific. So you have, women who were experts in arithmetic. You have women who was a librarian. You have a woman who was a driving force and a main sponsor of the famed Baitul Hikmah, which is, which I think had like the largest collection of books at one time, maybe like 1 million books. You have Fatima Al-Fihri, many of you know who she is, created the oldest running degree granting university in the world, which is in the Guinness Book of World Records. And then you have, this university still exists in Morocco right now, in Fez, Morocco. Then you have Nana Asua she was a princess, a Fula princess. She created her own Yantura system of education in Nigeria. And all these women who would come would learn, then they would go out on to the villages and they would teach others in the villages. It was such a great system, You have Fatima Madrid, she corrected the alchemist of Ptolemy and found mistakes in the eclipse calculation, because Muslims, were very advanced in astronomy and mathematics. And so here you have a woman like her. And today's woman, so this I show, the book has a lot of book endings. So there's a medieval woman and there's a modern woman. So here you have this Dr. Hashima Hassan. We all heard about the Webb telescope and remember those incredible images coming from the Webb. Guess who's behind that? She is the program scientist of research. So here we have a Muslim woman who's behind the Webb telescope. And how many people know this little factoid? So what went wrong? A lot. And, women are belittled. Their sexuality is portrayed as a grave danger to men. They are perceived as a sexual temptation. They are rendered invisible, and they are seen as a source of temptation. And so people started regulating this when they started creating the gender barriers. And it was now deemed necessary, and they codified some of these laws, and they deemed it necessary to segregate and seclude women, not because they saw them as a threat to society, but to protect women from foreign and unruly, of course, Muslim men. So women have to pay a price for the men's inability to control themselves. So this is some of these laws got codified, and they still exist in some countries and in the minds and the consciousness of many Muslims, unfortunately. This has redressed, and today's, because of Afghanistan, women's education in Afghanistan has restricted mobility because of the misapplication of mahram, because people are saying every woman has to have a mahram with her. And they say that it'll take woman's attention away from what they believe is her essential duty, to be a wife and a mother. And some even believe that educational transformation will result in a gender imbalance, causing discontent and instability in the home and society. In other words, an educated woman is going to want a career, and once she has a career, then she's not going to be able to be controlled. So these are some of the reasons for. I'm just going to skip this and skip this. So in a conclusion, because we have about half an hour to engage with you one-on-one. In 2002, I traveled to Afghanistan as part of a delegation of Muslim women, interfaith delegation. I decided to meet the Taliban face-to-face, and I had the opportunity to speak briefly to the deputy minister about the importance of education. And I told him that neither the Quran nor the Prophet made any distinction between the education of boys and girls. And I told him that I was sent to America to pursue an education, actualize my potential. And then I told him that in 2005, when I witnessed you, the Taliban, striking mothers with canes, I switched my career and began to study Islam because of you. I thank them. I mean, if it hadn't been for them, I'm not sure I would have pursued this study. Like Ani's shaking her head, right? Did we all not get involved in this work because we were also trying to understand how to explain everything? So today, I told him I am now able to, because of my education that I received from my family and my self-education, my self-study, I can share the truth of Islam and dispel the falsehood with my fellow Americans. And I can only do this because my family instilled in me, invested in me, the knowledge, which now serves my community, in America and elsewhere. And, he was so struck and so moved that he said to me, people in our rural areas have no knowledge of this kind of information that you're sharing with us. So why don't you come to the provinces and teach this to the women? Because they know that in their provinces, women have not received any education, even religious education, right? They are basically left ignorant. And you're welcome back, he said. And, unfortunately, months later, after I returned, he was fired because he was considered to be too progressive, even for the Taliban that are now concentrated in Kandahar. So the problem is that even though, you have these moments of hope, right? We don't know what's going to happen. And so we can't pin our hopes on people who are in power. We have to go drill deep down into the grassroots and keep the grassroots educated and help them. So this book that I wrote is a toolkit for women to fight their own battles, because I cannot go to every corner of the world. And I'm delighted to release this work like a treasured gift to each and every one of you. I've been preparing it in my head since 9/11, and now it's finally here. And today I wear many hats. I am a marriage officiant. I am a lay jurist. I guide. I arbitrate when I need to. I even was asked to become a khatib. I play the role of imama when I have to. I don't have a title. I don't wear robes. I don't wear turbans. I don't even wear a veil. And I would never compare myself to any of the luminaries, but God gives us different blessings. And I see my stage always enlarging. And I'm no longer married to an imam, but I keep going. I cannot restrain myself because I keep gaining strength from the legacy that women have left behind and from the charge that God gives to each and every one of us that is in the Quran. So I'm passing on my proverbial boxing gloves to those who need them: Muslim men, activists, imams, lawyers, male allies, practitioners who strive to conquer the cultural attitudes that prevent us from enjoying our divinely ordained rights. So I am here and excited to engage with each and every one of you. The book is available on Amazon, and we could talk a little bit more. So I'm very grateful that there are some men here with us too. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining.
Daisy,
Really
don't disconnect your hosting, because I'm having trouble on my
okay.
internet connection. So
Okay.
stay as a host. If you can take the slide off, so it'll just be you and I on the screen.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you have any questions, please raise your hands. Before we take questions, though, I have to say that I want to share a bit about the call to prayer story, because I had a similar sort of an experience. I was practicing the call to prayer when I was about 12 years old, just coming of age. And my mother ran to my room, like in all fear in her eyes, and stop, 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 stop. I'm like, what? What's the problem? What I did wrong? And she says, no, girls can't do the call for prayer. And I'm like, and in my heart, in my gut, I knew this was really utter nonsense. So that was, I think, my feminist awakening here, without knowing what that meant. And then, decades later, I'm doing, like yourself, doing the call to prayer. But one of the most really iconic moment for me doing the call for prayer was in front of the gay men's chorus concert at the Disney Hall
Oh, wow.
concert hall. So they asked me to do the call for prayer as the opening to the Act 2. And this really was iconic in the sense that here I am, like full circle decades later, doing the call for prayer in such a public manner, but
Right.
also to show the audience that not all Muslims are homophobes, right? And so that it had this the expression of a call to prayer that was not really like like a powerful male voice that you are hearing, but more like a inviting kind of a
Mhm.
tone. So it was a very different tone. And then I love the fact that you had all these women in contemporary times who are leaders. Aminata Torre, who was on your list, she's actually on Muslims for Progressive Values Advisory Board now. So
Wonderful. Great.
yeah, yeah. And your point on marital rape uh,
Uh-huh.
is actually really amazing, because we too had gathered scholars of Islam from Indonesia and Malaysia to issue a fatwa on marital rape in
Yeah.
Malaysia in the context of Southeast Asia.
Right.
So yeah, it is actually a real issue, folks. So I'd like to invite folks to ask whatever questions that they may have. I also want to ask folks to please not buy this book at Amazon, because for
Oh.
ethical reasons.
Mhm.
So please buy it from your local bookstore, anywhere else if you can. I appreciate that. Okay, Paul, I'm going to unmute you. I see your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Yes, I have a book upstairs called "Split the Moon." I think the title. I wasn't going to run upstairs and grab it, but it says in there that Muhammad married a 6-year-old. Is that true or is that not? Do you know anything about that?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question because in my comments I did not mention that. So Aisha, who is the Prophet's wife, a lot of people say that she was married at either age 6 or at age 9. And so I did some digging because I never believed that in my heart because it's just not in keeping with the Prophet's own character. So it turns out that she was close to 18. She was definitely not 9. It's a hadith, a false hadith, which is not even attributed to the Prophet. So oftentimes people say, oh, it's a hadith of Aisha. Aisha's hadith, this hadith surfaced 100 years after in Iraq. And so it has, so I have spent about 2 or 3 pages on describing how Aisha was the myth that she was a 9-year-old bride. She was close to 18. So it's worth reading that. It's in Article 12, which is choose marriage maturely, which is actually an article on what do you call it? Let me just on child marriage, because people say that they justify child marriage because they say Aisha was 9, so we can marry our children at 9. So this Aisha's young age has remained unchallenged by Muslims for almost 1400 years. And so I'm not only challenging it, it is incredible. There's so much scholarship, from eminent scholars that have actually done a deep dive into historical facts that just don't add up. The dates just don't add up. So math is math. Dates don't add up. So so it's really important to read that.
On this one, recently, it was about 2 years ago, there was an article published by the university, by a student, doctorate student, Joshua Liddell at Oxford University, a beautiful article. And what he did, he studied all the hadith narrated by this guy who narrated hadith about Aisha's age. And then he found out that this guy is a partisan of Aisha, and then he's fabricating these hadiths as a counter argument, as a propaganda for Aisha, on behalf of Aisha, against the partisan of Ali, who claimed that Ali was very young age, was with Prophet Muhammad, since he was with Prophet in the youngest age, therefore he deserved leadership. In order to counter that argument, he made up this story. And therefore, those hadith books has no reliability. They have multiple different various motives behind them. And this was a beautiful scholarly work, exposed the motive behind this fabrication. Initially, I thought maybe pedophiles fabricated this one. This was my conjecture. I was not sure. Of course, I said perhaps pedophiles, but it seems someone who wanted to promote Aisha in that stupid argument for leadership.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I wish I had found that, because I would have added that in here as well. But I was going to the more traditional sources, and I found Dr. Salahuddin, who had written a hadith, Syrian hadith scholar, who actually went through all the timelines. And actually, when you think about it, so logically, it makes no sense. The Prophet's wife has just died. He is in love with Khadija. I mean, it's clear from all the evidence. We don't talk about it much, but the Prophet is deeply in love with Khadija. And you know, that whole year when she died was called the year of the mourning, because he was in deep mourning. He could not believe that his wife was no longer there, because she was his confidant. She was everything to him. And so now this woman comes to him. I think it was either Salama or one of his, the lady who was very close to him, comes to him and says, Muhammad, you need a wife. And he's not interested in a wife because he's been in love with somebody else. But he says, okay, because he knows he has children at home, right? He's a prophet. He has children at home, and he does need a wife, because every household needs a wife. So he says, who do you recommend? And she recommends two people right away. And she says, you know, the 55-year-old woman whose husband was just martyred, and she already had like 3 children. I think I'm just trying to get her name right for you. So let me just give me 1 second. Anyway, her name will come to me in a few seconds, but then she recommends Aisha. And now, if Aisha is 6 years old, how is Aisha supposed to take care of a 55-year-old man? Or roughly that's what the Prophet's age. No, he's not 55 yet. No. What is the Prophet? How is the Prophet supposed to be taken care of by a 9-year-old? How is a 6-year-old going to take care?
Daisy, this drives me crazy, this kind of arguments.
That's what I'm
Forgive me
saying.
for that.
So it makes
I know,
logically makes
but
no sense whatsoever, right?
But the Quran, it contradicts many verses of the Quran. But unfortunately, the followers of Hadith distorted a few verses of the Quran. One of them is incredible. It is very clearly violation of Arabic grammar. They say among the list of the women can be married those who haven't had menstruation yet. They put yet there, which is absolutely contradicts to many verses of the Quran. And therefore, there are similar verses in the Quran, for example, about marrying, the verses about marrying orphans' mother, they reverse it, orphans.
Yeah,
They
that's in the polygamy. So you will read that in the polygamy article. Yeah.
Therefore, it is not really easy. They have 1400 years. They have created a domino kind of lies over lies over lies. You destroy one lie, and then they bring another lie in connection. It is very difficult. I commend you for your work, for your struggle, for declaring women's independence from become slave of men. And but of course, I disagree with your methodology 100%. But as a sociologically, politically, I support your quest for equality. MashaAllah.
Yeah, thank you so
you,
much.
Adib. Wait, hang on, Dizzy.
So just very quickly, because so Sauda was the woman, and she was 65-year-old widow, the first woman that he married. And then the proposal was sent to Aisha's father, Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr said, no, I can't marry Aisha because she's already betrothed to somebody else. So she is not 6 years old because she's already engaged to somebody else to get married, right? So he refuses. And then, of course, that guy, their family find out that Abu Bakr has become a Muslim and Aisha is now a Muslim. So they take their proposal back. They're like, we're not marrying our pagan son to your Muslim girl. And so once the proposal is refused, then the proposal comes back to the Prophet. The Prophet is already married at this point to Sauda, who's now taking care of his household. So this is the story. And then I also describe how many other women that the Prophet married and what age they were. So you will see in the book that each woman was either a widow and she was an elderly woman.
Okay, so everyone, just I'm gonna go to Renee. You can unmute yourself. Just so you know, Edip Yüksel is one of the authors for the Progressive Quran, which is something that we use as a point of reference
I would like
MPV.
that.
Quran Reformist translation.
The Reformist translation. Sorry. Yes.
Okay. I would love that, Adi.
Yes.
That's so great that you did that.
Yeah. Renee, your turn.
Oh, I forgot to write Jacob. It's okay. So my question is for you personally, Daisy, how do you not feel isolated with all your beliefs?
Well, because I fundamentally believe, okay, so what I always thought was like my belief, and you know what I thought was my belief, and I'm like open-minded, and you know I'm liberal, so therefore I must be unique and different. But then I go back into 7th century, and I discover everybody was thinking this way, and I loved being in 7th century because I discovered that 7th century and the way the Prophet behaved with women and the interaction that was going on was similar to my current life. Like, you know, like the Prophet was like my own father. The things he would say to women, when my father was told, why, you know, you have a 3rd daughter, so you're like nothing, you have 3 daughters. The Prophet had 3 daughters. Actually, you know, he was a father of daughters only. So he was very respectful of women. So I don't no longer feel isolated because I feel like I'm on such firm ground that I am convinced of everything now because I've gone into the Quran and I see how the Quran validates and supports and honors women with all these luminary women that we have behind us. And then also the 7th century milieu. It's what we have done to our religion.
There is a question that was sent to me by Kandil, and he asked, what are we missing in our communities today that can unite liberal and progressive Muslims or even traditional Muslims to take down this path? And if you have any other questions, I would suggest you raise your hand so that we're intending on wrapping up by 10:30 or in 10 minutes time. So go ahead, Daisy.
I think that unfortunately we have politicized Islam too much, and you know, political scientists and political social scientists and you know, have taken on the mandate of promoting Islam and the spirituality that infused Islam and gave us the golden age and created the harmonious balance of what Islam was, its values, and how its, you know, values were promoted throughout the world. You know, the ambiance that you get from a holistic approach to Islam, right? So anchored in spirituality, then the jurisprudence is there to serve the spirituality, not the other way around. And then you have the laws that are justice-oriented laws, where mercy and justice are equally balanced. And then you have that kind of this overlay of beautification of Islam, which was also stripped away from us, right? So beauty is no longer the goal. Something else is the goal. The politics is the goal. And so we have to unfortunately undo a lot of that. And I feel like just bringing in the proper understanding and going back to the source, the very beginning. Sometimes if you have to make a change in, you know, for the future, you have to go back into history and borrow from history, because I feel like anchoring it back in history is very freeing. Like for me, I think that Renee asked this question, how do you not feel isolated? I don't feel isolated at all. I'm so freed now. I feel like, oh my God, I'm convinced. So with that, I'm going door to door, speaking to people, communities, and sharing this knowledge quickly with people so more people can get inspired and more people can take on this at the grassroots level. This is the work we have to do. We have to plant a seed, and we don't know where that seed is going to grow, but we have to do our share right now.
If there's no other questions, Mariam, yes, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm curious if there's any sort of effort to get these books to masjids, like to just have in the on the bookshelf, for anyone to look at or borrow.
Yeah, well, that requires a lot of outreach. And oftentimes I've tried to do that even with another book that I published, Wise Up, which was a book that I published on against extremism. And it had great utility for the community because ISIS was rising. But I actually had to hire somebody who did outreach into the mosques. And it was very hard because the culture of not reading, although Muslims will tell you, oh, Islam values education and, knowledge, no one reads. No one reads. You give a book to anybody, no one reads. So we have lost the desire for seeking knowledge. When you go to any masjid, do you see a library there? You see a shelf that has 6 Qurans? I mean, in my own house, I have like 500 books. So there is no desire to accumulate knowledge, to seek knowledge. We just say these things, go to China and seek knowledge. But, there has to be this revolution to seek knowledge. And Ani and I have been speaking. I was just overseas with some friends, and they told me that there was an effort going on by some men to start refusing inheritance to girls because the brother will take care of you, the father will take care of you, somebody will take care of you. And this is in my own birthplace. I was really angry because this was never the case. Women always got their rights. So somebody is trying to promote this notion, and it's catching on very quickly because everybody has a smartphone and people are sharing some things with one another. So I said, stop right here. So I started reading my article from, how the Quran explains. This Quran explains in detail the inheritance that everybody has to receive, right? And the Prophet even said it's one of the first things that my community, my ummah, is going to forget, the rights of inheritance. So teach it. He instructed people to teach it. So I was reading that, and somebody posted it on Facebook, and I had a lot of other women come to me and said, we hear all these preachers in America and these preachers online, and why don't you start a podcast? So this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to actually take what's in the book and start doing podcasts and start spreading it on YouTube and other places, because people are consuming information differently than we were consuming it. And there's a lot of competition out there. So if you have to get your ideas out there, you really have to be on the platforms where people find this information. So we also have to think about the reality of how information is consumed. So, so my goal is, I'm not sure if I can get to the masjid through book selling and book sending, but I could certainly, try and send my podcast to the imam that I know there and say, hey, maybe you want to share this with your people. So that's where it's at.
Well, let me share a sad story. When we talk about education and how paramount it is in the Islamic tradition of old, my brother converted to becoming a tabligh, which is a very conservative practice from India originally, but I'm originally from Malaysia, and he basically has taken his children out of secular public school and just sending his children to Islamic school in the most remote village, and depriving them of a real education in math and sciences and humanities and what have you. And so he's preaching to me to say, so we follow the tradition of Prophet Muhammad. And I'm like, hang on a second. Prophet Muhammad was all about education. And what are you talking about? And so I don't understand how this is. The way we practice our Islam is so I mean, this is very harsh. It's so bastardized. It's unrecognizable from even the Islam I was raised and the Islam that Daisy was raised. And so the younger generation of Muslims, particularly in the West, have such an Islam that is really unrecognizable. And we're Daisy and I have the same age, and so the same generation, and so it's really hard lifting. And so, Daisy, you can always count on us to promote the work that you do. You know
Thank
that.
you. Thank you so
And
much.
just to end on a positive note, that we at Muslims for Progressive Values, we are real hardcore readers in our community.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, in order for you to become progressive, you have to be critical thinkers,
Yeah.
and you don't just fall into becoming a progressive Muslim or looking at Islam from an inclusive manner, like yourself. You're a critical reader.
Right.
And so that's the good thing about our community, and we're always promoting books. And so I really hope many of you take the work that Daisy has done and also the work that MPV has done and really share it, because that's the only way that we can really change people's hearts and minds,
Yeah.
and to bring the traditionalists also to seeing that our progressive Islam and inclusive Islam is actually the traditional Islam.
It's a traditional Islam. It's the real Islam, actually.
Islam.
You
Yeah.
know, so Ani, to your point, and the article that I wrote on education, actually, I wanted to go deep into Islamic education, how it started. And when the Prophet started the school, he started a little school in a friend's house, one of his followers. Like it was a secret school, like a homeschool. And everybody was seated in a circle. And this was so revolutionary because who were his followers? You had like the people of the highest society, right? You had some pretty hoity-toity people who were very rich merchants, like Abu Bakr. And then he had the slaves. A lot of people were, and then you had women. And they had them sitting in one circle together because the Prophet was afraid that the revelations were coming and they were not being explained to the people. So even though he had Ali writing, furiously writing all these things, and he had another woman who was a scribe. So you had these scribes writing the stuff, but he had to explain the verse. So he was explaining this. This little halakha is still the concept of the halakha that we use to this day. And then eventually, then he started teaching them writing. Then he started doing critical thinking with them. So what do you think? So he was engaging people. So I have it detailed in the book of how Islamic education began and how other sciences were added to it, at the sciences of the time, what was available at that time. So, and including how to teach people, when to stop, how much a student should learn. Like you should take it easy on the student, only teach, easy subjects. So I think you should copy the section and send it to your brother. And then you said, oh, I just found this interesting. Can you please tell me? Like, this is why I curated the book in the way it's curated, is for anybody who has any issue that is struggling with that issue, you can cut and paste, or you can just get a Kindle book and highlight it and send it to people. And eventually we're doing toolkits. So you will have 2 pages of each right pamphletized for you. So, and then the podcast. So I'm going to try and make it even more super easy for everyone to have this information. So
Well, I want to thank you, Daisy. I want to I also want to share you a card that a dear friend of mine sent me. I don't know if you can read this, but it said,
you are an endangered species.
You're not an endangered species.
Oh, okay.
So I want to end on a positive note that no, Daisy, you're not you see that unicorn in the back there, a stuffed animal. That's from the same friend. He sends me that. I'm a unicorn in that regard. But thank you so much, Daisy, for the work that you've done and will be doing. And we'll be working together on many of these issues. And thank you everyone for attending. I really appreciate your attendance, your questions. This will be up on our Muslims for Progressive Values YouTube channel in a couple of days. So be patient with us as we